Hi, everyone, and welcome to the PhD Career Pathways Phase 3 Humanities Coalition Review of Promising Practices. My name is Christine Thompson, and I am the Program Manager here at CGS. While everyone is arriving, I want to highlight the webinar logistics for today. So thank you in advance for your cooperation. So first, please submit any questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Please use the chat to respectfully discuss with your fellow participants. And the recording and presentation slides will be emailed to registrants and posted on the CGS website and our YouTube channel after the live event. In a moment, you will hear from CGS's president, Suzanne Ortega, and our vice president of best practices and strategic initiatives, Julia Kent. Then our three distinguished guests will share expertise and insights from their programs. This will be followed by a 15-minute moderated Q&A. We'll finish off the hour with upcoming events and other ways to learn more about humanities programs and research. With that, I will hand it over to Suzanne. Suzanne, thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks, Christine, and welcome, colleagues. My name is Suzanne Ortega, and I have the pleasure of serving as the president of the Council of Graduate Schools. Since I know many of you are faculty members at member institutions, you may not be that aware of CGS, and so I thought I'd just give you a few words to set the context for who we are in this day's discussion. For the past 60 plus years, CGS has served as the primary organization that works to advance graduate education and research in the US. In collaboration with approximately 460 US and Canadian members, but probably another 30 or 40 international affiliates, CGS supports its mission through advocacy and public policy, through innovative research and development, and the sharing of best practices in graduate education. Our primary points of contact are the graduate deans at your institutions. Well, for at least 10 years, and possibly longer than that, career diversity for doctoral students has been a topic that our research and best practice work has focused on. We've joined with our member universities in pursuing this work because we know that our current and future workforce is changing. It won't look tomorrow like it does today, and certainly not like it did 10 years ago. And we know that workforce will require PhDs in the academy to be sure, but in the whole range of careers and leadership positions in business, government, nonprofits, and private sector spaces. PhD students receive really rich and deep training, methodological training, the ability to frame problems, to identify what are important and critical questions, to develop strategies and methods for solving them, or at least answering the questions and completing projects through their ups and downs, showing resilience and persistence. And this is equally true for students trained in the humanities as it is for students in STEM fields. However, we often hear less about what universities are doing to help humanities doctoral students think about the full range of careers available to them and to prepare them for successful transitions into that range of rich, diverse, and meaningful careers. So today's webinar is going to spotlight universities that have been working to fill this gap. They've joined CGS in an initiative called the Humanities Coalition, which you'll hear more about in a moment. And they're doing really, really incredible, important, impactful work to support PhDs in the humanities. So I'm really pleased that they can join us today and that you can join us today. And I want to give a special thank you to our presenters, Dana Williams from Howard University, Emily Barman from Loyola University Chicago, and Katie Anthony from University of Southern Mississippi. And of course, I want to thank my CGS colleagues who are joining us here to make this webinar possible. At this point, Julia, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. So to set the stage for today's webinar, I'm just going to say a few words about the project that we'll be hearing about today. As Suzanne mentioned, the PhD Career Pathways Project is actually a series of projects that CGS has conducted over the past 10 years. And the primary goal is to broaden and improve doctoral education through data collection, information sharing, and resources for students and universities. At the QR code there on your screen, you can go straight to the PhD Career Pathways page on the CGS website, where you'll find a variety of resources. And next slide, please. One of the resources you will find, or one type of resource, are data briefs or research briefs reporting on data collected by around 75 universities that collaborated with CGS to better understand the career pathways of their PhD students and alumni. And this is across all broad fields. And we're grateful to both the National Science Foundation and to the Mellon Foundation for supporting this work. Next slide, please. The information briefs are on a variety of topics, and there are more to come. The titles of some of those briefs are listed here. These are the titles that you'll find at the QR code. You'll also find a resource for supporting department and program communications called Shaping New Narratives About PhD Careers. And one of the great things about these resources is that they can really begin to demystify some of the beliefs about PhD education and help us to really understand in a data-informed way what happens to PhDs after they graduate. Next slide, please. The CGS Humanities Coalition builds on this work in a variety of ways. After we began the broad data collection effort that I described just a moment ago, we really felt that it was important to begin to use those data to inform improvements in doctoral education. And with support from the Mellon Foundation, we devised a project that has two broad goals. One is expanding the number of universities that are collecting and using PhD alumni career information for program improvement. And second, developing promising practices for better supporting career preparation for humanities PhDs. So in July 2020, we made 5 awards to institutions to join our data collection effort. In 2021, 17 universities, members of CGS, joined a coalition to use the data that we were collecting to inform improvements on their campuses in humanities doctoral education. And you'll be hearing from 3 of them today. And then in the most recent period, we've continued to collect data, and we have watched as our partner universities have implemented projects in 3 key areas. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So the projects that were developed out of the Humanities Coalition focused on 3 areas that were found to be lacking in the preparation of humanities PhDs. They are preparing for diverse roles in education beyond the professoriate, grant writing and securing resources, which we'll be hearing about today, and building professional relationships, also known as networking. And you'll have other opportunities through the CGS website and through CGS programming to hear about the other areas of work. But today we'll focus on grant writing and also resource development, which is not only an essential skill for faculty, but also critical across a range of careers in other sectors, in particular the nonprofit sector, and in university administration and staff roles. So at this point, I'm very pleased to reintroduce our speakers. Next slide, please. First, Dr. Dana Williams, Dean of the Graduate School at Howard University. She is also Professor of African American Literature. Dr. Emily Barman, Dean of the Graduate School, Vice Provost for Graduate Education, and a Professor of Sociology at Loyola University Chicago. And then Dr. Catherine or Katie Anthony, Interim Dean of the Graduate School and Associate Professor of Communications at the University of Southern Mississippi. Thank you very much, and I'm pleased to hand it over to Dr. Williams.
Thank you so much, Julia, and thank you, Suzanne, for all the work that you do to support the work that we try to do in graduate education. I'd like to talk to us briefly about a project at Howard that was a part of this sub-grant that focused on pathways for funding projects in the humanities at Howard. The project established a professional development program for doctoral students in humanities and humanities adjacent disciplines. And I'll say a little bit more about how we expanded to humanities adjacent disciplines here, because our graduate programs are limited to the divisions that we craft at Howard that are called humanities. So they're humanities adjacent in some instances, but humanities depending on where you are. These were the departments of English, African Studies, History, Communication, Culture, and Media Studies. And we also had some engagement with those economics students who were in humanities projects. The initiative consisted of a workshop series, integration of grant writing into our doctoral academy, which was, I'll say a little bit more about that. I'll pause for it now. And then a 4-credit pilot course on grant writing. So Sarah, if we can go to the next slide. So the first activity was really around very specific grant writing skills that we designed in a boot camp. So the project team focused on having 3 faculty contribute to 3 different types of sessions that we held in a single day, because we felt strongly that a focused and tight series or boot camp would have a different kind of effect from trying to do it over the course of the semester for 18 weeks, but we did try some of that as well. The first session was called the Opportunity Fit, where we really helped our students to learn how to identify funding opportunities that match their aims and needs. Then we had a session called Finding Your Voice, where we taught students how to tailor their specific research idea for a grant proposal to avoid the kind of one-size-fits-all or avoid trying to shoehorn their project into a grant, and to really help them to understand that grantsmanship is really about supporting the work that they do and not chasing the grant exclusively. And then for the third session with the boot camp, we called it Grant Fundamentals, where students learn the main components of the proposal. After we had oriented them around kind of concept and theory, they learned how to present their goals, how to write clearly, how to craft research questions, a succinct literature review, how to articulate the significance of their research, which is really important, obviously, and then how to design the budget. We talked a little bit about sustainability and evaluation as a part of a grant writing skill set as well. The emphasis for that boot camp, again, was on students who might be considering careers where grant writing would be a part of the work that they do, either in higher education or in nonprofits, to really feed that diverse pathways. So our next activity, and if you can go to the next one, Sarah, thank you, was a proposal development series. The success of that boot camp, and I think the number of students for that one, we had 43 students who attended the classic kind of 90 students registered, 40 stayed for 100% of the time so that they could get the micro-credential. But those students, we asked for feedback. The evaluation and assessment feedback suggested that they would like to create mini conversations in 90-minute increments about specific aspects of the proposal development process, focusing specifically on fellowships for this first iteration. So this is just an example of how we brought the students who were on campus. And I should mention the first one was virtual. This one was on campus so that we could also help students to build humanities community as well. And if we can go to the next example, we had our doctoral career pathways conference, where we really introduced students in all disciplines to the different types of pathways for students who earn doctoral degrees, and the humanities sessions focused on those folks who had grant writing experience, and to help the students to understand those grant writing opportunities inside and outside of academia. And then the final project activity that I think I highlight here is an example for our next animation, if you will, is the Doctoral Academy, which the students really enjoyed, the faculty coaches. In this, it's a project where we bring up to 20 students to the Wintergreen Resort, for example, and they have to indicate whether or not they want to work on a publication, something that they have been told by a faculty member that they can revise, that would be good for publication. They can work on a dissertation chapter, or they can work specifically on a grant or a fellowship. So those students who wanted to work exclusively on the grant or fellowship obviously had coaches that helped work them through that. And we follow really the Social Science Research Council model here, which basically says if they have an advisor who takes them from the beginning to the end, they're more likely to complete. So we provided some supplements for those faculty who worked with students who got them from beginning to submission of proposal. And then for those students who did not say that they wanted to work on a grant writing proposal, we still integrated the grant writing and fellowship application process into the workshops for them each day. Moving from our project activities, and we can go to the next slide, I'll talk about just some quick key takeaways. We also offered the course, which was a 16-week, 3-credit course. The strengths that the eval of that course, as articulated in the evaluations, really suggested that it prepared the students for a career that would include grant writing. It helped them to understand how to design a viable grant project. It helped them to identify funding sources, how to learn to clarify their project goals, and to draft with a reviewer in mind. So there were probably 20 or so metrics that we had, but those were the top 5 in terms of the students saying that those were the key takeaways from that course, that it strengthened their skill set in that regard. Another big takeaway, the effectiveness of the activities in relation to the course and the boot camp series had everything to do with timing. When we tried to do this work as integrated into students' already very busy schedules, we had less success than we did when we had students in the retreat for the Doctoral Academy retreat for a week, or when we had the boot camp, or when we had the designated course. It was clear that the volume of students and the quality of their responses based on evaluations changed based on the length of time, or in a very concentrated way where they were able to have better takeaways. In terms of challenges for the course, very specifically, it has been a challenge to staff the course annually, because we're having to ask faculty to forego teaching what would be for credit in their specific department, to say that they're now being charged with teaching something that will count as our prefix for it, for example, is humanities, or HUMA in a general sense, and it doesn't have a department home. So that honestly has been a challenge that we're trying to find ways. The pay for it hasn't been so much the challenge as much as just the kind of technical, where do I get credit for this? And then we want to think about how we scale this beyond the humanities. We think we have a very good sense of it with the humanities, but how do we do this in the sciences similarly with faculty who are a little less inclined to do the kind of one-on-one work with the students for the course, and then for the mentorship for the grant activities. And then revelations and action items around the work that we were able to do. It was really good to build relationships with the funders, because we did bring funders in to talk to the students to help them to understand what expectations were for folks who wanted to be program directors, who would then also have a responsibility for grant writing. And then thinking about how we would support students through the external award application process. A result of that was adding that to the portfolio of our external awards or our extramural research associate dean, but then also providing support staff to be able to work with the students, because the success rate, obviously, with students who had support from beginning to end just shifted a little bit, or quite a bit, I should say. And I think I have one more slide before I wrap up in my next 60 seconds or so. If not,
That is your last slide.
All right, that was the last one. Then I'll say our topics quickly for our credit bearing course. Wanted to talk about just a little bit those topics that students found most impactful, the kind of intangibles, things they never tell you. And we brought in someone who was a reviewer to talk to them about that, or who was the program director who provided feedback to the review team. How do we interpret the guidelines, and what are the kind of 12 basic rules towards grantsmanship? How do you define your problems? So we had that categorized as what's the problem, what's the fix, and then what's the goal. And then finally, some additional work with the evaluation and sustainability plan in terms of the budget. Our key outputs from the course, our students had to submit at least one grant and at least one fellowship. They had to identify career opportunities that were grant writing related, and then to see how they envisioned themselves as a part of that. And then we provided them with the mentorship opportunities to work with the grant writers who were professional grant writers, and then the program directors who obviously do a lot of work with grantsmanship. So I'll pause there, and I'm happy now to really turn it over to Dr. Barman, Emily, who will share a little bit about the project at Loyola University Chicago. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana, and thank you very much to CGS for this opportunity and for organizing this wonderful grant and its implementation. So at Loyola University with Heather Sevener, Associate Dean, we implemented a program that came out of awareness of ours, the Pathways survey results about our students' lack of education in the area of grant writing, as well as a general sense that we needed to build this out at the university for our graduate students. So the next slide, please. So what we came up with, given the largely the complete absence of support for any form of grant writing for graduate students at Loyola due to some changeover in staffing in our fellowship office, is that we came up with a funnel model of programming. So we began in fall of 22 with a workshop on academic grant writing. So we expanded beyond the scope of the initial call for applications. We then decided that we would follow that up for students who had participated in the workshop on academic grant writing, which would give them a grounding in grant writing. We then worked with an outside consultant and offered a non-credit seminar on professional grant writing and fundraising. So they began to develop their skills in an understanding of the nature of considering career outcomes in the areas of professional grant writing and or fundraising, which was a huge success. And then we planned for an experiential course, non-credit, for a smaller number of students who would receive a stipend and work with university and local nonprofits and fundraising consultants in the area of professional grant writing and fundraising. This would give them the opportunity to have some hands-on experience, to gain an understanding of what these types of roles look like, and to participate in the local community in Chicago of professional grant writers and fundraisers. So this was our plan. We had a number of successes in that process, and we had a number of challenges. And I wanted to focus largely on some of the challenges we faced and how we sought to successfully or not address them. So if I could have the next slide. So our plan for success for our 3 stages of the funnel model of programming was we really wanted to raise student awareness. We knew that graduating students, alumni, reported that they had not received sufficient training in grant writing, but that may have been prompted by the question itself. So we wanted to have students be aware of the necessity, the importance of developing grant writing skills, both academic. We wanted them to become aware of careers beyond academia, the possibility of grant writing and fundraising, particularly for humanities students. So that was our first goal. We thought having achieved that, that would then result in, with sufficient marketing of our programming, that would result in them engaging in engagement in our funnel of programming. And then we thought this is a pilot program for Loyola. We would learn from this process, and we would move on to develop parallel programs around other possible clusters or particular career outcomes that would also be appealing to humanities PhD students, and which would draw from our community of alumni and local community partners. So that was our goal. I want to move to the next slide. And I want to start by talking about some of the challenges we faced at each stage of our logic model. So We had great success in growing student awareness. We marketed directly to students through various media, and students became aware of this programming, and we had a very high degree of participation in the first stage of our funnel, the academic grant writing program. Where we had a challenge, though, is that students' ability to participate and their sense of, this is based on self-report and also based on the faculty member who led the academic grant writing program, and then those who led the next two stages or organized the next two steps. What we found was that their faculty advisors were not aware of the necessity of considering the development of skills and experiences and growing networks that would help them to consider and succeed in multiple career pathways. And we also found it a bit challenging to market to faculty as well about our programming. So we have really sought to sort of consider how we can best share information about the resources available to students and the necessity for students in the humanities to be considering multiple career pathways. So in the next slide, we focused on a two-step solution. So the first step was I went and attended a faculty meeting in each of the departments in the humanities. And then based on that experience, I also went to social sciences faculty meetings and really shared discipline-specific data that I had gotten from professional associations, from some of our alumni data, from working with the graduate program director of graduate studies. But we also realized that graduate program directors they didn't have the time and the capacity, and graduate program directors turnover, that they didn't really have the time to be consistently educating both students and their faculty peers about what was the situation regarding employment opportunities and student support and university support for their students. So we have an ongoing project, which essentially takes place whenever the relevant staff in my office have some downtime, where a staff member charged with professional development for the graduate school works with each graduate program director to develop a tailored brief, drawing largely from professional association documents. So like the American History Association would be example, on what are the career outcomes for graduates, for PhD graduates? What careers are they having success in? What would skills and experiences, what would that look like that would happen in graduate school? And what university support is available to support those students? And our goal is to develop a brief for each of the PhD programs that have this, that share this sort of context. And those will be available to graduate faculty. So that's one solution that we have. The next slide. Another challenge that we had is that we have, I'm sure we're not alone, is that many of our students moved away from Chicago during COVID, and they did not return.
Students also have moved to online modalities
Which is fine, and it was the initial two stages of academic writing and professional grant writing participation means excellent success for you. Face the challenge, despite students request for student summer funding, despite students request for more hands-on experience for multiple pathways, we actually did not have very many students interested in participating in our summer grant writing internship. Don't know really how to address that, because we are interested in moving towards more in-person opportunities for students in the summer. But we will be doing that. We'll keep working on that moving forward.
Emily, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there appear to be audio problems on your end. Sorry to interrupt, but there appear to be audio problems on your end. Well.
So you can't hear me, or is it going in and out?
We can hear you now.
Okay. Yes, my laptop has been giving me trouble all day. I'm really sorry about that. I will try and yeah, sorry about that. I will continue. Next slide. Our next, we also realized that in developing our professional development support, we also knew that students would need to develop networks and experiences. And so we worked to connect with partners beyond academia. And this was, we have a very small alumni office, very small corporate relation office. And so next slide, please. I'm glad the audio is working. Is that we worked with our alumni relations office to implement a software. It's called Loyola Linked, which links graduate students and alumni for mentorship, networking, and career exploration. And we're also able to access those alumni and their information. So alumni need to sign up. I'm sure many of you have this already in place, but for us, it was kind of a real revelation. We also were able to contact alumni and ask them about opportunities for coming in to speak with our students, and also for mentorship and internship experiences and opportunities as well. So that was one way we managed to grow our community partnerships, which are so important for careers beyond academia. Next slide.
I think your audio is causing problems again, but I think I heard the next slide.
Is it possible to go to the next slide?
Maybe give it a moment.
Okay. Thank you. And then finally, we had planned on, we had already discussed the budget program directors.
Emily, I'm sorry to interrupt again, but can you turn off your video and see if that helps? Interrupt again, but can you turn off your video? Yes, see if that helps.
Okay, I'll try again. Oh. Okay, I'll try again.
That works.
We also, great. We also realized that while we knew what we would like to develop as parallel programs to this for other humanities departments, we didn't have sufficient resources at Loyola to do so. And so instead, and next slide, please. What we began instead is a pilot program of providing students in the humanities with a more multifaceted, well-rounded experience by interning with a local nonprofit, so that they were getting access to grant writing, access to fundraising, but access to other work opportunities and experiences, so that they could see what career opportunities, what experiences might be appealing to them moving forward. Next slide, please. And that is it for me. Thank you. So I'm going to pass this over to Katie.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Emily. So I am very excited to tell you a little bit about what we've been doing at the University of Southern Mississippi regarding our grant writing and how we've been working with graduate students and faculty to really expand their opportunities in that area. So next slide. Okay, so this grant began during the COVID era, of course. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about, as I go through each phase of this, sort of some of the challenges that we had on our end. So the first year, sort of for year one, we endeavored the School of Humanities at Southern Miss that has graduate programs in history and in English. One of the ways that they began was we hired a graduate assistant who was pursuing her PhD in creative writing, and she had quite a bit of experience in terms of grant writing. She was formerly a nonprofit attorney who had spent her first career working in that space. And so when she came on at Southern Miss, she was a huge asset to the students and the faculty members because she already had a great bit of experience knowing where to find those resources. And so she was an invaluable asset to us and sort of spearheaded the program while also helping graduate faculty members and graduate students identify places where they could apply for grants for the humanities. And she also would assist them in that process as well, kind of sharing her expertise and helping them in that. In the same year, we had faculty members, one from English and one from history. Again, this was still heavy in the Zoom era, where these faculty members would hold these Zoom lunch sessions on grant writing and would assist faculty and students, giving them their own expertise and sharing their experiences and how to find grants, how to best apply for grants, how to partner with others. And so that is that composed sort of our first year. Okay, next slide. And so the culmination was going to be to offer, this is kind of phase 2, to offer a paid internship course for graduate students so that they could not only get course credits toward their graduate degree programs, but they would also be paid to assist humanities faculty in selecting and applying for grants. And so this was going to be a 4-week summer class, again, offered during the summer for these students. And unfortunately, the faculty member who was sort of best equipped to teach the course, who was very excited to teach the class, ultimately, he had a dual appointment, and the other half of his appointment, some things occurred, and he was no longer able with his time to teach the course. And unfortunately, because we found out so late, there really wasn't a good pivot to the fact that other faculty members had already made their summer plans. And so we basically had to cancel that class, scratch that, which was unfortunate because we were really excited about this paid internship experience for our students and to also get real application with their faculty members to sort of get that experience doing that with them. And so we have the faculty here in the School of Humanities are awesome. And so we sat down together and said, what can we do? Because we're not going to have this course. And so we decided to pivot. And so there was a pivot to also include another center that we have on campus. Next slide. And it resulted in basically a full year grant writing workshop series that was designed not only with our School of Humanities, but in conjunction with what we call the Center for Faculty Development. So it is this entity, and I'm sure most of your institutions have one, an organization that, again, is a big resource for faculty members. And that entity had basically surveyed in the previous year, what are faculty most interested in? And there was an overwhelming need or request for more experience, more expertise, more training in grant writing. And so we partnered with the Center for Faculty Development to design this year-long workshop series. So faculty were able to come, join, participate, no matter what discipline they were from. And graduate students from other disciplines were also allowed to come and participate. However, it was a paid experience for the humanities graduate students because, again, wanting them to, at the end of this, have some sort of a product, them learning, selecting grants, getting all of this learning and gleaning from the expertise of the speakers that we brought in that I'll talk about in just a second, but also at the end to have a product where they have found an application, a grant application, and they work through actually applying for it, working on that application throughout this entire process, and then at the end, of course, applying. And so this was a interdisciplinary effort across campus, but of course, with the focus of humanities graduate students at the fore. And then, like I said, the graduate students who completed the full program and completed all of the work involved, including putting together grant applications at the end of the program, they did receive their stipend. Next slide. So this is actually, we have just wrapped here at Southern Miss. And so this is a kind of a long, gives you the perspective of all of the events that were present in this workshop series. And so they started in the fall of 2023, and we had speakers including individuals from our Office of Research Administration, because of course it's really important for us to see their years of experience, have them kind of share that with our humanities graduate students and faculty members. We also had faculty members across campus who have been incredibly gifted and incredibly successful in securing external funding. And so some of these it was not just humanities professors, but of course also professors from STEM, but who could tailor it to talking about how humanities students could really like how to write a successful application. What does the story need to be like? I mean, there are so many, we say grant writing, but there are so many different facets of what goes into the application process. And so we had it, like I said, our final workshop was on April the 5th of this year, and the students are submitting before the end of this term. Our term ends in a week. They're submitting sort of their final materials to complete the program. Next slide. So I wanted to just share a little bit of the feedback that we received from students and faculty members. And so we started out, like I said, it was a group of interdisciplinary, graduate students from across the campus and faculty from across the campus. But we began with 14 humanities faculty students, or excuse me, humanities graduate students, and then ultimately 12 completed the program. And it's, did everything to complete it. And so we polled those students to kind of see what their takeaways were, what was helpful for them. And so, for instance, I'm no longer confused on where to even start when I see grant writing opportunities that will help me find my research. They articulated they thought this was thoughtful, engaging, and specifically learning how to structure a proposal, how to do budgets, how to find grants that are specific to the humanities. So that's a little bit of student feedback. Next slide. From another student, talking about how obviously the emphasis on the humanities was really important, and also how in the world to structure grants, and how to look at unsuccessful grant applications and learn from their mistakes on those and then go forward. And then also learning how to structure a grant narrative, like what should that entail? And so these were some of the things that the students found to be most important and most impactful from their time. And then next slide, which I believe is my last slide. So on this, we also reached out to the graduate faculty members and then the staff members who also were interested in grant writing to see sort of what their thoughts were on it. And so they felt like, and I won't read it to you, but here's some of their feedback, talking about how the speakers, the information was relevant and helpful to their work. The Center for Faculty Development should continue to offer programs like these because it was helpful in expanding their knowledge on grant writing. And then further, they discussed that grant reviewers' perspective should be offered again. And then also they wanted to hear more about how in the heck do you find grants, and then the timeline, how to successfully apply for how to apply for grants where you have to have a clear timeline of what you're going to do with your projects. And then finally, again, more information on budgeting and how to market the impacts of these grants. And so these are some of the takeaways that we specifically asked for the students and the faculty so that I could share those. We did have challenges, again, like scheduling. But again, on the whole, this experience was really helpful to our graduate students and our faculty in giving them a better understanding of really what the grant writing process is like. And that is all I have with my presentation.
Thank you so much to our presenters. I think we're going to take the deck down now and transition to the Q&A. As noted at the beginning, you can submit a question through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And we've actually already had a couple of questions roll in while you all were presenting. And so I'll jump right in. So this was a question, I think it was perhaps specifically directed to Emily at Loyola, but you may have other responses at other institutions. This was the question: how did you increase student awareness and how did you measure it as you were thinking about the need to develop student awareness in the area of grant writing and resource development?
Thanks. I will keep my video off since clearly that is helping with my video situation. So we increase student awareness by through our own communications from the graduate school about our programming, by and on our website with emails to students, but we also asked graduate program directors to share information about our programming as well with students. And then I, or the Associate Dean for Student Support, we met with the student representative body for each of our departments as well and shared the information. And in each case, we provided a rationale, including data about employment outcomes that I had put together for each discipline about where declines in tenure track hiring for each department and notable alumni who had gone into alternative career pathways to try and articulate what possibilities were there for them. In terms of measuring student increases in student awareness, nothing quantitative, but we've had, because so few students participated in our summer internship, we had funds left over, which CGS kindly allowed us to use to reoffer the academic grant writing program. And we had additional students participate in that. And we also had students from other departments across multiple of our affiliated schools asked to participate as well. And we still have requests coming into the graduate school asking us about grant writing support. And now that our fellowship office is staffed, we're able to send the students there for support in grant writing.
Thank you. So this is a question I think that pertains to everyone. Since you all started these projects during the pandemic, how did you confront the change in student expectations about in-person programming? Emily, you specifically mentioned a lack of interest in in-person programming, but I suspect the other two institutions were in a situation where suddenly people's habits and expectations about how they accessed information and resources were changing. So Dana Williams is nodding, so I'll let you start out in addressing that question.
Sure, I appreciate it. The shift that we made for the boot camp to 100% online was after we had attempted to do registration with it in person, and the numbers were just significantly low and lower than we thought that they would have been. And just to add just a little bit to the previous question in terms of making students aware too of the opportunities and the options, we did a similar type of thing with registration, just like kind of direct email to students, working with the grad program directors to make the information available. So once they saw that the information for the boot camp was available in registration, and even with the promise of lunch that the graduate school provided as in-kind contribution to the grant project, the numbers were low. So we shifted to the boot camp and saw the numbers go up as virtual. But we did see the difference between the community building, obviously, that happened when we did the in-person doctoral academy, which required the students to be in person for the full week without an opportunity to miss any of the events. And so we shifted finally with our brown bag series to in-person was our default, and you could request virtual. And the attendance was still consistently higher, obviously, with the in-person than it was with the students who would register for virtual and might be present or might not be. So I completely understand the difficulty of trying to navigate the back in person. And at Howard, we stayed virtual, or at the very least hybrid, with that option much longer than most schools, I think.
Thanks. Katie or Emily, would you like to answer that question as well?
Sure. I'll just, much like Dana, we provided for each, trying to, increase the interest. We provided, lunch at each of those sessions. We made it a requirement for people who wanted to participate in the, anyone could come, but if you wanted to, as the humanities graduate students, participate in the workshop series with the end goal, having had that experience of that and then, earning the stipend, they were required to be in person. But that was not, the students really thoroughly enjoyed the opportunity from the feedback that I gathered, again, to be in person, to have that one-on-one time with the presenters, because the presenters were always in person, which was excellent. And so I didn't find that it was that much more. Obviously, if people had conflicts, they were able to join virtually, but most of them came or present. And we didn't seem to have a problem getting them there. But again, I'm sure that our numbers could have been higher had we allowed for that. But for the students who were on that certain program, they did have to attend, the majority of them in person. So.
Thanks. Emily?
Thanks. Yeah, our problem is compounded by the fact we have 3 campuses that are several miles away from each other. So I think we've decided that unless it's an experience for a student in the community, that we will be we've moved to online. We're going to see what happens with students who join the university post-COVID, you know, as time passes since COVID, just to try and gauge interest. But for now, I think we've given into the reality of our current graduate students' preferences.
Okay, thank you. So a question came through about staff training. Many of you have professional development centers for students, but those centers may not have in-house expertise on grant writing. Often professional development programs for graduate students are a little bit broader in scope, focusing on communication skills, for example. So how did you find staff who could help support these efforts or even get trained in this area?
I'll be honest, we relied a lot on the external funders to support, because our career services offices don't have any support at all for training for grant writing, for instance. But we had made connections through any number of funding agencies where the project directors were happy to come in to speak to students at different points. I mean, obviously, we know that it also is a part of their service. So we took full advantage of that, just to be honest with you. We had someone come from Mellon Foundation, from Social Science Research Council, someone who came in from National Endowment for the Humanities, and then some professional grant writers that we work with as a university through contracts to come in. And then we also had faculty who are very successful in the humanities to make some contributions. The American Council of Learned Societies, and literally just going on websites to see who would be available. And more often than not, we got positive responses from more than one person from those fields to help students both understand what is expected, what to anticipate with reviewers, but then also how they do that work. And I don't know how I forgot the Modern Languages Association. Yeah.
Thank you. Other responses to that question?
So we had a fellowship office that wasn't staffed, so we relied on a combination of a faculty member who was doing this for her specific PhD program, and she expanded it out, the stipend. And then we, as I said, hired an external consultant to lead our philanthropic grant writing training.
So we have time for one more question, and I'd like to ask a question that's been on my mind as I've been listening to you. To what extent were you able to embed some of this work into actual doctoral programs? And the reason I ask is that arguably the ability to secure resources, whether you're doing it for your own scholarship or whether you're doing it for a job outside the academia or in a grants office, is an essential skill for people who graduate from doctoral programs. Has there been any, have you been able to kind of communicate that idea to faculty within your programs, or has that been embraced and been made a part of the actual curriculum in any of the programs you've worked with?
Well, Katie, you go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. No.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I will just say, has it formally been added? It has not, but from the experiences of like we would love to see this become more of if there's a way to make this like an actual class, and I'm not talking about the paid internship class, but we've had conversations, again, it has not been fully enshrined in the curriculum, but conversations about how can we take what we have learned, because with all of these speakers, and again, we use nonprofit attorneys, we use the funders, we used our own Aura people. I mean, we used as many resources as we could. And so what does that look like in terms of us taking that and making an actual grant writing for the humanities course, or something that would become part that the students, that the faculty could actually offer? And so we are looking at that. We have not done it, but it's so funny you said that, because that's been some of the conversations we've had at the end, because we don't want this to end with the end of this grant. I mean, I don't think that's the intent of it. And so how can we continue for this knowledge to be shared with future students who weren't in the program yet? So I love that question. We're working on hopefully doing something with it.
Great. Well, thank you very much. The work will continue. And in that vein, I'm going to hand it over to Christine Thompson to close us out. Thank you very much to each of our presenters.
Yes, thank you. I just want to take a moment again to thank our presenters for sharing their expertise and time with us today. And thank you to everyone here for joining. So you had some terrific questions and likely many ideas to take back to your institutions. So we wanted to highlight a few ways to get involved and learn about innovative research in humanities field. First, follow us on LinkedIn. We post many events and project spotlights on CGS's social media pages, specifically LinkedIn. We also do post on Instagram and Twitter. So please follow us to find out more. Secondly, if you have not registered, for the 16 institutions, to view those, Sarah put into the chat the direct link to our Humanities Coalition pages, but there is the pathway to follow that as well. There are 16 institutional projects in the Humanities Coalition and related publications, each with their individual project pages. And lastly, if you have not registered for the summer workshop or New Dean's Institute, we have extended the registration deadline to Wednesday, May 15th. There is a specific workshop, if you could advance to the next slide. There is a specific workshop on humanities programs, as you can see from this slide, so please join us there. The registration link is on our CGS website under events, I believe. So please check back on the Humanities Coalition page for a recording of this webinar. I know that was a question in the chat. Yes, this webinar is recorded. We said earlier it will be available on the CGS website as well as the CGS YouTube channel. So this concludes our webinar for today. Thank you again to our presenters and everyone for joining us, and have a great Wednesday.